関するニューヨークの GDPR に関するようなお話もいくつかさせていただければということで準備をしております。今もうお部屋の外にお昼ご飯準備できてますが、お昼までもうちょっとお待ちください。では、マイクよりですね、お話しさせていただきたいと思います。よろしくお願いいたします。
Okay. So this. All right. Thank you for having me to this meeting and coming today. I'm Mike Frank. I'm a product manager with MySQL. I've been with MySQL for 10 years now. And today I want to talk about all the complexity of security and compliance, and hopefully help you understand the tools we have and some things we have that can help make you more secure, and also help you pass security audits and position your company to be in a good position as far as regulatory compliance goes with security. I will talk briefly about some new things we're working on. So this is by no means a promise that we'll do those, but I will, at the end of the talk, discuss some areas where we'll be doing more things so that you're aware of what's coming down the road. So today I'm going to talk about some of the challenges. I'll go through those fairly briefly because I think most people are quite aware of why this is a hard thing. And then what I want to focus on is the solutions we have, and I suspect there are some solutions we have that you may not be aware of. And so I want to make sure that everybody knows all the different tools that you would have at your disposal to make MySQL secure within your enterprise and to satisfy the requirements of various auditors. And finally, I will wrap it up with the new features that we have in the MySQL 8.0 release that came out in April. So, as complexity grows, security becomes more and more difficult. And our environments are in some ways becoming more complex to secure with distributed database systems, with distributed applications, with legacy applications, outsourcing third-party management companies or consultants, the cloud. And I would argue the cloud actually makes much security simpler because clouds, by definition, and in particular the Oracle Cloud, is very security forward. So I want to show maybe, okay, it's very complex, but how do I solve these problems, and how do I, even though yes, it may be complex, I need to make this my environment secure. In addition, right, security is not an option. Security is required. How many people here are required to be secure? Right? I assume all hands would be up as far as, it's important to your job to have a secure company, right? So everybody, yeah. And everybody's probably now dealing with new regulations. So in the US we have, or worldwide, we have the payment card industry requirement that almost every business that's dealing with consumers has to be in compliance with. Now we have the GDPR from Europe, where any company whether it's Japanese or in the US or in the EU, if they have data from somebody that's a citizen of the EU, has to be compliant with that. And I imagine there's other Japanese-specific guidelines that you all have to be, in compliance with. When you look at these regulations, though, you notice, because security is a basic type of thing for the most part, each one of them requires continuous monitoring to be sure that things stay secure, that they are secure, or that you can detect issues that come or that are going on. They require various methods such as cryptography to make sure that data is protected. They require you to protect data from being lost. And so it's this whole data retention part is usually in these regulations. And then all of them pretty much require you to audit so that you can watch what's going on in the system, that you can see what powerful users have done or may have done. Powerful being folks with a lot of rights to the data. And more, that part is actually where a lot of the security concerns are coming as well, and we'll talk about what we can do there. And I won't talk about this long, but there's business implications other than have customers be upset with you if you lose their personal data, but there are very, very large fines if you are not in compliance. And again, it will depend on which regulation you're having to comply with, but the way that governments enforce people doing things is through fines. And GDPR in particular is very, very, probably one of the most expensive ones out there. But if you lose your rights to work with the various credit card companies or banks, that can be quite devastating as well. We are motivated as engineers working for our companies to make sure we stay secure. One of the things that when you read these regulations, and I often, customers want some, I would call it the easy button, right? Just press this and it's GDPR compliant or it's PCI compliant. Well, there is not an easy button. So these guidelines really provide, what the end goal is and what you want to do as far as compliance goes. But they won't tell you how to achieve it. And much in how you achieve it is not just based on what we do in our databases, but how our applications handle data, how we handle users, how we handle application users. I can't tell you what the exact script to run to make MySQL, compliant to a certain regulation. But I can tell you various tools that you can use towards getting to that. So we have to look at several steps that when we become compliant. In the GDPR, they talk about the top 3 here, but I would argue that there's really 4. It's assessment of your environment to determine where is sensitive data, is that sensitive data secured, how does that data flow, who can connect into the database, is it only applications, is it various users have actual login rights to the database. So we have that side. We have a prevention side, right, where we're really trying to use various security techniques such as access controls and cryptography to protect the data. And in the end, cryptography is really an advanced access control. We need to watch what's going on. Often data is lost to outsiders trying to get into our systems, but it's also lost through insiders. And so we have to, I would say, trust but verify with internal users, with internal applications. And then obviously we have to watch out for hackers and those sorts of folks. And then finally, nobody's perfect, especially if it's some insider who has proper rights. Bad things might happen. DBAs might get upset and drop tables or do various things. And so in the end, you have to be able to recover from an event, right? And so this is the fourth part that's not in GDPR, that it is in many of the other regulations, that you must be able to recover from these attacks and have the data available quickly and send it back online. So from the MySQL side, we have various things. So it's not just the product. It's the product with features that we put in it. It's tools that we provide around the product to help become secure, and I'll talk about that. It's security best practices. We have white papers on and fairly long prescriptive MySQL slides, decks. There's one that you can download from the website. I think it's up to 110 slides, each with something you can do related to securing the MySQL database. So, much of it's really about, references for you all to look through, to be able to check off and see that you've gotten all the different places secured. We've got webinars, and then we have various other third-party integrations. So we don't do all the types of things that can secure a database. We have third parties that we work with along that line. So this is a diagram that sort of helps get a visual of the whole environment. I've color-coded it so that you can see where different things play as far as assessment or detection or recovery or prevention. And I'll go into depth through the talk about each of the products, but we have full encryption across all the network connectivity for all the MySQL products at this point in time. So SSL can be used everywhere. We support various methods of strong authentication. We have the thread pool, which many think of as a scalability tool, but it can also be a denial of service attack tool that can be used. Often authentication users, that's sort of the weak link, especially if you have hundreds of servers. So it may be that you need to integrate with some enterprise authentication product. I'll talk about what we have there. On the Workbench side, many may be surprised that I've listed that, but Workbench has many features that help you assess your security. Enterprise Monitor is obviously on the monitoring side, but there's other advisors that I'll talk about that you'll need to think about. On the third-party integration, key management, password management, those types of things are typically the weak link, and so we have very strong integration with highly secure third-party products that manage keys. I'll talk more about that. Enterprise encryption, sometimes it's not just about encryption within the database, but encryption between applications and the MySQL database. And so we have functions for that. Backups, right? You have to have a backup to recover, even if you have high availability. Warm standbys aren't backups. People make mistakes, security things happen, so you always to have an archival type of backup to get back to data because mistakes can propagate or hacks can propagate across many servers. And then finally, auditing trail, right? Who did what, when, and being able to bring that out of MySQL into a consolidated audit store of some sort. So on the risk assessment side, right, one thing, and especially if you hire into a new company or if you're working with a third-party app, you need to understand the data that's in the database. And it would be nice if we don't have to learn all those things, but if you need to assess security, then you need to look at your data model and determine where sensitive data is, and so that you know what to check as far as controls being in place. You need to make sure that you have, a strong security configuration, but you also need to make sure that configuration stays secure, that you monitor changes, and you need to look at all the different privileges and assure that the concept of least privilege for users is enforced. And I'll talk later about a new concept of roles that we have in 8, where you can actually do things where administrators can do privilege escalation, like you commonly do with Linuxes with sudo. So on the enterprise side, we have a couple of tools for assessing your risks. And so there are a lot of different dials to adjust in MySQL, and it would be nice, right, it's nice to have software to assess software. And so on the enterprise monitor side, you can use that to understand what are my list of accounts inside of MySQL. Have they changed? Has somebody added an account? So you need to be alerted possibly, right, when a new user with super privilege is added. And you need to make sure that you're also aware if any vulnerabilities have been opened up. So if you've locked it down, but if it becomes unlocked, you need to be aware of that. And so MySQL Enterprise Monitor, whereas it's good for assessing performance issues, it's also very good at assessing security issues. The other product to look at is the MySQL Enterprise Workbench, and it's got various capabilities in it so that you can look at tables and data more at that level. So inside the MySQL Enterprise Monitor, again, it'll identify and alert you to vulnerabilities, and it'll assess your current setup, and it will give you advice with its advisors. So it's got a number of security advisors that will tell you what maybe you've missed in setting up the MySQL server. So you definitely, if you're using MySQL Enterprise Manager, you want to make sure that you pay attention to the security advisors. But then the other thing is that it'll continually monitor, and you can continually reassess your security status at any point in time with MySQL Enterprise Monitor. And so it will look at, again, the powerful administrators are important to look at, database privileges, things like session limits, right? There's various things, right, where you can limit, you might not think of session limits as a security feature, but it is. So these type of things can harden your environment. The other thing you can do is you can use Workbench to reverse engineer your data model so that you can understand the data you have. But it also has things like, if you haven't noticed, if you right-click in Workbench, there are schema inspectors that have various things so you can see what sort of data, what kind of columns. You can look at the permissions on full table, and there's also a table inspector. So use those products to make sure you check on things. The other nice thing about Workbench is you can reverse engineer your data model, and you can detect changes to the data model. And if, for example, somebody adds a credit card field to a table, then you'll immediately notice that sort of thing. We have other products. We have transparent data encryption. We have a firewall. We have MySQL Authentication, where we can externally authenticate to Microsoft Active Directory, to Ldap, or use Linux PAMs for authentication. So on the transparent data encryption side, we, in 5.7, we encrypt the table spaces, and in 8.0, we encrypt redo logs, and we'll have bin log encryption going forward as well. And what it does is it reinforces the security of MySQL database itself so that folks can't get on the operating system and steal the files, because when they steal the files, they won't have the key. And we've got strong key management such that they won't be able to get to the key. The reason we call it transparent data encryption also, and the nice thing about it is it's very simple to turn on, and it really is transparent to end applications. So this is something easy to do. The performance, people always ask me about performance. It has very little effect on performance. Your NOD buffer pool is still in effect, and modern hardware is able to encrypt and decrypt things at very high rates of speed. So we have customers now encrypting every single table in their databases. They're not noticing any performance issues, so I highly recommend looking at that. The nice thing about MySQL transparent data encryption is it's quite easy to use. You simply enable a plugin, and then for each table that you want encrypted, you say encryption equals yes. It will lock the table while it does it, so be aware of that. Although I think in 8.0 we're going to have a new option. So if you upgrade to 8, it'll encrypt it in the background. And then you basically configure a key plugin, and so that key plugin could work with key management interoperability protocol, with Oracle Key Vault, with Gemalto Key Secure, with Thales, with anybody that really uses the standard PMEP protocol. We found that they all just work with standard interface. On the key management side also, right, like I said, we support the OASIS protocol KMEP. If purchasing or initially experimenting with this, you know, these key management servers are not inexpensive, and so, you know, you may want to also use an encrypted keyring file that we have. This is more secure than not encrypting the keyring file. It's not as secure as, for example, KMEP encryption, but it's a good way. And if you have a secure way to provision a passphrase, then this is a good option. We have an enterprise firewall. It supports a whitelist. We have users with whitelists of 250,000 SQL statements in it. It's very secure. It's very fast. And also, if a whitelist isn't appropriate, if you have a fast-changing application, you can also create JSON-based rules for the firewall. It works in conjunction with the audit plugin. Again, on enterprise authentication, often it's more secure to have a central place where you manage your users. We support the various standards for that, whether it's Ldap, whether it's PAMS, whether it's those other things. And I would also add that the Ldap authentication plugin is very fast. On the detection side, we have the audit product and the firewall product. These things can again assess what's coming in and can give alerts on that. So audit is really an important part of a lot of security guidelines. We have very powerful Json rules as far as that goes. And basically you just, again, enable the audit plugin. A user will connect in, and you enable a plugin, you define your rules, the user will connect, the events will come out. The events can be encrypted and stored in JSON or XML. They can be compressed as well. Often audit files can be quite large. This reduces by 10 to 15x the size of an audit log if you use compression, JSON, and then it does support encryption as well, which is also important. Audit files do contain sensitive data. I'd add that the Workbench product has a way to inspect the audit data coming in, so a nice tool for that. And again, I've talked about Enterprise Monitor. It also integrates with the MySQL Firewall product and the backup product, so that you know that those products are working, running, and monitors that status. On the backup side, we have MySQL Enterprise Backup. Backups become much trickier when you start to enable encryption. And so, and databases are getting larger and larger to where logical backups on anything over 50 to 100 gigabytes can take too long. So MySQL Enterprise Backup is very fast. So if you've got hundreds of gigabytes or 100 gigabytes to tens of terabytes of data, it's a great product. It's hot, it's non-locking, and it also backs up your cryptography keys in an archival manner. So if you're required to keep data in backup over a long period of time, then you'll be able to recover it even though it has been encrypted. Lewis will talk more about high availability going forward, so I won't go into details on that, but really that's certainly part of your security setup. On the function side, we have all of the public key infrastructure functions supported inside of MySQL. And those functions can be used in concert with the standards inside of application. And so, for example, you could generate a public key. You could share that public key with an application that you want to encrypt data but not be able to decrypt data. That application can use standard OpenSSL library or other standard Java libraries or whatever the language supports to encrypt the data and push it into MySQL. And then if you needed to have the private key inside of MySQL, you would be able to decrypt the data there. So if you have highly sensitive data, you can use PKI inside of MySQL. There's also key ring functions and things like that. All right, so now I'll talk about MySQL 8.0 and the security features we have there. So we've added a much requested MySQL roles. So roles enable you to define a group of people or a particular time for people or for certain tasks. You can define a role. And a role basically aggregates access controls, grants, revokes on various tables. And so it's like a user that is not able to log in and can be assigned to another user. Users, when you grant them a role, they can be set a default role so that automatically when they connect the roles, privileges apply. Or you can assign a role that's not set as default. So for example, if you had a user that had a role that could do some powerful things to, for example, change a salary table or something like that, or you had an application doing that, and you didn't want, for example, a hacker to be able to use that application user to do things, what you can do is you can set a default role that has lower privileges, and then you can do privilege escalations within your application by setting this more powerful role. So again, it's like doing a sudo in Linux when you're doing powerful administrative things. You can set up various roles to allow permission temporarily and then undo it. And that way, things like SQL injection, can't do various things unless they, for example, were smart enough to know all your particular roles you set up in your database. We've made all of our access controls atomic. In the past, with replication, if you had a very large access control statement, and if you did have some sort of shutdown or glitch, when it was applied, it was possible to have a partial commit. So with the MySQL new data dictionary, everything, if you run it, it either works or it doesn't. So I don't call it transactional, I call it atomic. It either works and is committed or not. We also have something called dynamic privileges. If you look in the MySQL 8.0 manual, you'll notice that you can, instead of in the past where you maybe had to overprivilege an administrator with super privilege, now you can go in and do very specific privileges for backup operations or for auditing operations or for replication management, various things. And so you can really limit down the privileges now. And super is really just a role that's an accumulation of various dynamic privileges in the system. We call it dynamic because as you enable new functionality within MySQL, these privileges become available. And if you, for example, if you were using group replication, if it's enabled, that privilege is there. If you're not using group replication, it's not. So it's sort of dynamic. Another one that's important for various reasons, performance one of them. So in 8.0, we now dynamically link OpenSSL. And so this one allows you to use optimized OpenSSL within an operating system that will use the CPU acceleration of an AES-NI CPU component. And so you'll get much better performance. Mostly you'll see this on the network encryption side, where you really notice a big bump there. So anyway, this is good. The other reason for security that this is better is because if there is a security flaw in OpenSSL, now instead of waiting for us to have a new release and certify it, which can often take weeks, the minute an OpenSSL library is available that's been patched, you can load that on your system in MySQL. We'll just use it. And finally, OpenSSL supports various hardware engines, and so you can use hardware accelerators for your cryptography, and all of the MySQL encryption is based on OpenSSL, and it may be faster, or it also may be more secure because the processing for encryption is being done outside the operating system in those cases. We have a full suite of password policies. We have password history. We have lockouts. We have the ability to set timers and policies on users failing to put correct passwords in. All sorts of things have been improved to MySQL 8. The most significant one really is that we now have this password history in it, so that you can really enforce strong password on your users, not just by a strong rule, but also by a strong history, and you can basically just set the length of that. Many may have noticed that we have this new caching SHA-256. The old hashing algorithms and older versions of MySQL can easily be reverse engineered with rainbow tables. If somebody gets to those tables and gets to those hashes, they got your passwords. So we strongly encourage you to upgrade to the new caching SHA-256. We have various blogs about this if you need more information, but we call it caching SHA-256 because it's very, very fast. The downside of new modern hashing algorithms is they're very, very CPU intensive. We've come up with a way to, and they have to be that way in order to keep hackers from reverse engineering passwords. At the same time, PHP applications or others on MySQL do a lot of connect and disconnects. And MySQL 8 can handle this with very high level of security. So, and ending, you know, we've got a lot of different features here that you can use to meet your regulatory compliance requirements. And so I hope in my talk I've shown you everything we have, and that you'll be able to really set up a very secure enterprise by using those tools. And finally, going forward, we are going to continue to add more things on security. In particular, the top of mind, especially for GDPR, is masking. And so look for news on the masking side going forward. And then when you get the slides, you'll be able to get a whole list of references and security things we have. All right, I think I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
ちょっと待ってくださいね。じゃあすいません、いわゆるここで午前中のセッションが終了ということになる。ここからですね。